Renaissance got a Bitcoin, Gab, BitChute, Daily Stormer, Unz Review, BitChute guy named Mr. Obvious, a YouTuber named Luke Smith. This guy gave 28 Bitcoin, half of which went to me, and everyone else got 1. And it was like a who's who of everyone in the dissident right. Amren, VDare, Unz Review, Gab, BitChute, everybody got some. Here's where it gets interesting. Searching for information on the email address connected to the Bitcoin address led us to a personal blog we believe belongs to the extremist donor, and which identifies him as a French computer programmer. The blog had been inactive since 2014 until a new post was published on December 9th, the day after the donations were made. Shockingly, the post appears to be a suicide note. And I'm not going to read the whole note. You can find it online. It's on the Chainalysis article. But long story short, it's a French computer hacker who started receiving Bitcoin in exchange for his services in 2013. According to his suicide note, he got diagnosed with a neurological disorder with no cure. It's the most painful disease known to man with no cure. And he decided he was going to commit suicide. He got a luxury hotel room in Paris and decided to commit suicide. But before he killed himself, he said, I'm going to donate money. He said, I will bequeath my fortune to people that I think are defending Western civilization, because he was like right wing. And so this is one excerpt from the suicide note. It says, quote, I can't imagine myself spending my last days more and more diminished, not contributing to society, not fighting to preserve it. And that's one of the things that completely changed for me these last years. I care about what happens after my death. That's why I decided to leave my modest wealth to certain causes and people. I think and hope they will make a better use of it. This is Chainalysis again. It says French publication 20 Minutes confirmed the death of a French computer programmer who appears to have been the owner of the Bitcoin wallet from which the donations were sent, and the blog on which the suicide note we posted above was published. Reporter Philip Berry spoke to someone who knew the donor personally, who confirmed his death by suicide on December 8th. So, this guy who I never knew, never met, never really talked to, was suffering in an extraordinary way, resolved to commit suicide, which he admitted in the suicide note was a selfish act. But he went out with a selfless act. He donated his fortune to the people he thought were preserving and fighting for civilization. And for whatever reason, he saw me as the most important figure. That's why he gave me half of the total donation, obviously. And that had nothing to do with January 6th. Now, given the nature of it, it was such a large and unusual sum of money. I never had a big transaction before that, so it was the size of the transaction. It was facilitated by Bitcoin, and it came from a foreign country. Now, all of that is enough to warrant attention by itself, but especially after January 6th, because I was such a vocal proponent of Stop the Steal. I was going to Atlanta, Harrisburg, Phoenix. I was all over. So naturally, the feds were looking for foreign financing. That was their narrative. That's what they went with. They said this was foreign financing of these riots and insurrections in January 6th and all that. So they were looking at me, they were looking at Alex Jones, they were looking at these types of people. They found this transaction and they flagged it. And they said, before this insurrection, this unusually large Bitcoin transaction from a foreign country went through. Now they investigated it and they found this had nothing to do with January 6th. If it did, why would they give money to Unz Review? That had nothing to do with J6. Why would they give money to Gab, BitChute, Ethan Ralph? I mean, none of these people really had anything to do with Stop the Steal or J6. They weren't bankrolling it. They weren't financing it. Many of them weren't even there. So, what's more, the January 6th event was not even announced until after December 8th. So the donor was literally dead before January 6th was even put on the schedule. Forget about, this was masterminded, orchestrated. The guy died before the event was even announced, because all of that was moving very quickly. If you remember in 2020, We like scrambled to do these protests, and everyone was just doing it to defend Trump in the stolen election. So one had nothing to do with the other. Some French computer programmer who I didn't know, never met, bequeathed his fortune to a dozen people and then killed himself. Now, I happen to be doing these protests because I said the whole year the election would be stolen. I said since June 2020, it's going to be a red mirage. I said in October 2020, it's going to look like we're winning, then we're going to lose because of the mail-in ballots. Then it happened. So we kind of bootstrapped it. I drove to Lansing. We flew to these capitals. We tried to put something together and to fight to get the state electors to claw back, the state representatives to take back the electors in the Electoral College and get Trump to stay in office. While this was happening, some guy who I didn't know killed himself and bequeathed half of his fortune to me. And God bless him and God rest his soul. Now, after J6th, the government took an interest in me and the donation. And Chainalysis posted this. This was posted on January 14th. 10 days later, the Bank of America account was frozen. Now think about it. I received the Bitcoin transaction. I transfer it to Coinbase. I sell it. I transfer the cash to Bank of America. The Chainalysis report comes out and says there's this weird Bitcoin transaction. 10 days later, the Department of Justice freezes that Bank of America account. And I'll read to you the protective order that released the funds because I have it on hand. I'll post it. I'll post it under the Milo receipts so you can see it, and I'll read it. You want the receipts? You got them. You want my life? You want transparency? Here you go. So I just posted on Twitter, and I'll show you right now.
Americanism, not globalism.
Hit the wrong button. Hit the wrong button. Show's not over. Okay. I'll show you the order from the DOJ that I received on July 21st, 2021. Whoops. This is from the Department of Justice. It says, to whom it may concern, on January 23rd, 2021, this office submitted a letter stating that the above referenced accounts at Bank of America were subject to seizure and forfeiture on the ground that they contain proceeds of money laundering, wire fraud, and threat violations. We requested that the above referenced accounts be frozen pending further action from the office. This office is hereby withdrawing the January 23rd request to freeze the above referenced accounts. We appreciate your assistance in this matter. Now, the reason I'm reading that one first is to show you that was the reason it was frozen. They froze the money because they thought this was like money laundering from a foreign country to fund January 6th. And I'll read you, this is the email from Elizabeth Alloy. She's the attorney that signed the letter. So you can see down here, it says Elizabeth Alloy. This was the attorney. I'll read you the email she sent in February. So the Chainalysis report goes out January 14th. The money is frozen January 23rd. The money actually gets frozen in the bank on January 25th. That's when the account was actually frozen. Now, for weeks, I didn't even know what happened, okay? All I knew, and this is the thing about this stuff, is it was like 6 a.m., I had been up all night, I was getting ready to go to bed, and I checked my Bank of America balance because I checked my email before I went to bed, and I saw my debit card declined. And I said, that's weird. So I checked Bank of America, and my account had a legal order. It said zero balance. The balance is being held in a legal order. And I freaked out. You know, a lot of people don't understand this. When you get persecuted by the government, they just come for you. It is shock and awe. So they don't send you a letter. They don't call you on the phone. They just do shit to you. So it was January 25th. I'm chilling. I'm getting ready for bed. I check my bank balance, $0. Frozen, legal order. I call Bank of America. I say, what is going on? My account balance is 0. They tell me, all we can say is your account is on hold. This is like a theme. It's like Kafka-esque. You encounter these like bureaucrats. You're calling like the Bank of America customer service number, and you're like, hey, I'm like a targeted individual. My account balance is zero. What's going on? And you're talking to some like customer service rep, and they're like, all we can say is your money's gone now. And you're like, tell me more. And they're like, we can't. It's a legal order. So weeks go by, and eventually I call every day. Now, in the meantime, I'm like getting screwed because that's all my money. Now, conspicuously enough, they didn't freeze all my accounts. They didn't freeze my Merrill Lynch account. They didn't freeze some of my other credit cards, just the Bank of America account that touched the tainted funds that were related to the Bitcoin. I'm calling Bank of America every day. What's going on? Do you have an update? Finally, at this point, I learned the script. And I know how to get to the right person. So finally, I get to the second or third person. I go, listen, I said, I've been doing this for 2 weeks. I'm going to tell you what's up. You're going to put me on hold. You're going to talk to your manager. And then you're going to come back and say, you can't give me any more information. So go ahead. So she goes, I'll put you on hold. She comes back. She goes, I have good news. I have information. I said, really? She said, yes. I have the phone numbers of the people that put the legal order on your account. She says, and they are Elizabeth Alloy, I forget the other names, but this person, that person, they're in my notes. I'll pull them up just for fun. If I can find them. Maybe not. I don't know if I can find them, but Elizabeth Alloy was one of them. She said, these are their emails. These are their numbers. I said, oh, thank you so much. So at this point, I hire an attorney. And the attorneys reach out to the Justice Department, Elizabeth Alloy and the others. And this is what the Justice Department said to me. This was in February. They said to my attorney, Bob, Jesse Brooks was one of them. Jesse Brooks replies to my attorney, Bob, and she says, thanks for reaching out. I hope you are well. To answer your questions, the government does not have a timeline for the unfreezing of the money. Mr. Fuentes is currently a subject of investigation due to his placement on the Capitol grounds on J 6th. I'm CCing my co-counsels Risa Burkauer and Elizabeth Alloy for further correspondence. All the best, Jesse Brooks. So at long last, I had an answer. Now, over the period of like 4 or 5 months, we're pushing them. My attorneys are pushing them. Where's the money? Where's the money? Finally, 6 months to the day, July 23rd, 6 months after the freezing of the funds. Okay, you saw the letter. I'll pull it up again just in case you're doubting me here because we want to bring the receipts. Okay, this is from the DOJ. It says on January 23rd, we put the funds under a freeze. This is dated July 21st, 2021. So it's 6 months to the day. Here's what happened. I was clearly a person of interest on January 6th because I was leading a lot of Stop the Steal stuff, because I gave a speech, because a lot of people believed I was inside the building. There was a picture going around of someone that looked like me. That guy wound up getting arrested. So I was leading a lot of them. Some people placed me in the Capitol due to a blurry photo from a live stream. There was this weird transaction. Chainalysis ran it by the DOJ. They froze the funds. They put me on a no-fly list so I couldn't flee, so I couldn't use the money to hire an attorney, so I couldn't relocate. They investigated me for money laundering, and they found out that what happened was legit. I was not on restricted grounds. I wasn't inside the building, and the money was not the result of money laundering or anything like that. I never talked to the FBI. I never talked to the DOJ. It never happened. I never got interviewed. They never showed up at my house. Never happened. And here's the proof. In January 2022, I got subpoenaed by the House Select Committee on January 6th. And they gave me a schedule of 15 different things to turn over. They said, we want all your text messages, all your emails, all your phone calls, all this stuff. I didn't give them shit. I didn't give them not one thing. But they did call me before the committee to answer questions. I pled the Fifth Amendment on everything. Literally everything. They said, do you know who Donald Trump is? I said, Fifth Amendment. I said, what was it? Something, I had a whole script. It was like, in accordance with the Fifth Amendment, and I do tend to blah. It was like a whole thing, but it was like Fifth Amendment. Do you know that the pandemic happened? Fifth Amendment, Fifth Amendment, Fifth Amendment, like 100 times. This black chick said, do you support Hitler? Fifth Amendment. There's one question my attorney answered for me. I'll show it to you. Because this is my response to Elon Musk. This was the question. Mr. Fuentes, have you turned over any records or devices to federal law enforcement in connection with January 6th or since January 6th? And if you would like to take a minute to discuss, we can go off the record. Mr. Durkin, my lawyer, also recently passed. God bless him and rest his soul. A great lawyer. He said, thank you. Okay, we'll go back on the record at 3:15. Mr. Durkin, I can represent that he has, to his knowledge, not been interviewed by any law enforcement, federal law enforcement, or any law enforcement, or turned over any of his devices or anything else. So unless somebody was in his house under 2333, which I presume is like they broke into my house, or whatever, or the intelligence community is more clever than I think, as far as I know, the answer to that is no. This is under oath. This is under penalty of perjury. So you have Milo telling me on January 5th, the feds are telling me not to go. And I'm like, oh, really? Then you have under penalty of perjury. And by the way, people went to jail over perjury on this or over obstruction. Under penalty of perjury, they say, did you turn over devices? Did you talk to law enforcement? Could it be more unambiguous than this? He said, I can represent, to his knowledge, he has not been interviewed by any law enforcement, federal law enforcement, any law enforcement, or turned over any devices or anything else. Do you know how broad that is? No, nothing of that sort has ever happened. This was a full year. So back to Milo's question from the other tweet. Milo said, remember when Nick had his money frozen by the DOJ? Ask him how he got them to unfreeze it. Answer, informing. Then ask why it was or when it was unfrozen. Ask for proof. Well, I showed you. They froze it in January 2021. They unfroze it in July 2021. He says, why, when, ask for proof. There's the proof. I have an email from Elizabeth Alloy. She said, we froze the funds because of J6th. We have the legal order from the DOJ that says, we froze your money on the 23rd. We unfroze it in July 2021. We have a statement from my lawyer under oath, under penalty of perjury, saying he did never interview with the DOJ or FBI having anything to do with J6 in any way ever. So if I informed to get my money frozen, then how could all of these things be true? Because if I informed to get the money unfrozen, that interview would have taken place between J6 2021 and July 23rd, 2021. But in January, when did the testimony even happen? I got subpoenaed in January 22. I think the interview was later in the year. So if the alleged informing took place in the first half of 21, how can my lawyer represent in 22 that I never interviewed with law enforcement? Who would I inform to? If I was informing to get the money frozen, it would be about J6 during that window of time to the DOJ and the FBI. That's federal law enforcement. So either my lawyer has to go to jail, and we have to go to jail for obstruction and perjury, or what's more likely is that a patriot, someone who actually is selfless, gave their money to me because they were inspired by the show, killed himself. It was like a wrong place, wrong time thing. They took an interest in me, in the money. They froze it. The 6 months that they could legally freeze the money without filing charges expired. They couldn't file charges because it was legit. They released it. And then a year later, I said I never talked to law enforcement. And there it is. But it gets even better. The proof gets even better. Because there's something else that we found out. This is a note that was taken by somebody who knew Bill Barr. And I'm going to read to you the report about this note. I'll explain to you the significance. This just came out last week, okay? After January 6th, Trump's appointed Attorney General Bill Barr was working with the Democrats to go after the pro-Trump leadership that led the insurrection on J 6th. According to Project Veritas, a whistleblower that knew Bill Barr has revealed who Bill Barr was targeting. Now, keep in mind, Bill Barr was CIA, and he ran the DOJ in January 2021. He was working with the Democrats to put together the hit list for the House Select Committee that I eventually got subpoenaed under. This is from Project Veritas. It says, a whistleblower under indictment by the U.S. Department of Justice and granted political asylum has provided Project Veritas with explosive evidence alleging secret meetings orchestrated by former U.S. Attorney General Bill Barr, media figure Armstrong Williams, and other prominent D.C. insiders to plan the prosecution of Trump, his allies, and January 6 defendants. Patricia Lellis, hired in 21 by Armstrong Williams' media company Howard Stirk Holdings, claimed she attended dozens of meetings where Barr and others devised legal strategies to target Trump supporters and block his political comeback. She provided Project Veritas with extensive handwritten notes and photos documenting these discussions, which took place from 21 until 23. Lellis detailed a September 13th, 2021 meeting involving herself, Armstrong Williams, CNN commentator Michael Singleton, and former AG William Barr, which focused on strategizing for the newly formed January 6 committee. She wrote, the investigation will be focused on people close to Trump and make efforts to formally prosecute these people. Her notes reveal that Barr provided a list of targets, including Steve Bannon, Rudy Giuliani, Stuart Rhodes, Enrique Tarrio, Jeffrey Clark, the Oath Keepers, and the Proud Boys. Following this meeting, many of these individuals were subsequently subpoenaed to testify before the J6 committee or face charges related to J6 or the 2020 election. This is the list. This is the list before you right here. And this is the list. You can see, I can't read cursive very well, but if you read closely, you can see it. It says Michael Flynn. That's the first name. Steve Bannon, Rudy Giuliani. I think that says something Clark, something, Proud Boys people, Jim Jordan. And I'll move my camera out of the way so you can see the whole list. Whoops. At the bottom of the list, guess who? Nick Fuentes. Bill Barr, who was working with the Democrats on their J6 Select Committee hit list, I was on the hit list. I got subpoenaed after January 6th. That's where we testified. That's where me and my lawyer testified that I had never talked to federal law enforcement. Okay? There it is. Now, I want to go through some of the other evidence. Maybe this will be more compelling. So, as I said, out of 2,000 January 6 defendants, they all had one among three things in common. They were either one, on protected or restricted Capitol grounds, which I was not. They were two, vandalizing infrastructure or fighting with cops and media, which I was not. Or three, they were members of the Oath Keepers, Proud Boys, or Three Percenters. Every single one had one of those things going on except me. People retort and they say, well, what about Brandon Straka? They say Brandon Straka, well, he was charged, but he also was not in the militia, also did not fight with the police, also was not inside the building. So what do you have to say about that? Well, I'll read to you Brandon Straka's complaint from the Department of Justice. We'll go through the receipts. This is from the DOJ. This is the official complaint against him. It says, quote, Straka reached the top of the stairs where he was behind a large crowd of people attempting to enter the Capitol through a single entrance. He began moving through the crowd of people to get closer. He asked, are people going in? What's the hold? As the crowd in front of him pushed their way into the entrance, he yelled, go, go, go. He could then be heard saying to somebody, I want to try. He continued to push forward with the crowd and appeared to get within several feet of the entrance to the Capitol. Now, remember, I was 500 feet away. He was in the threshold of the building. At around the 3:45 mark of the video, an officer from the U.S. Capitol Police holding a protective shield could be seen in the crowd. As individuals pushed past the officer toward the Capitol, he held the shield in the air. Straka yelled, take it away from him. Take the shield. Take it. The crowd successfully pulled the shield away from the officer as the officer appeared to be trying to move back toward the entrance of the building. The officer then went back into the crowd to get his shield back. Several people pulled on the shield as the officer grabbed it, thus pulling him deeper into the crowd. They pushed toward the officer as Straka and others chanted, USA. Straka then moved to the entrance and appeared to get within a few feet of the doorway. Based on the foregoing, your affiant submits there is probable cause to believe Straka violated 18 U.S.C. 231A3 and 18 U.S.C. 2A, which make it unlawful to obstruct, impede, or interfere, or aid and abet another person to obstruct, impede, or interfere with any fireman or law enforcement officer lawfully engaged in the performance of his official duties incident to and during the commission of a civil disorder which in any way or degree obstructs, delays, or adversely affects the conduct or performance of any federally protected function, which I did not do. Based on the foregoing, your affiant submits there is probable cause to believe Straka violated 18 U.S.C. 1752A1 and 2, which makes it a crime to knowingly enter or remain in any restricted building or grounds without lawful authority to do so. So the answer is no. For those that say, why was he not charged? I would say charged with what? What would I have been charged with that anyone else was charged with? Because what applies to Straka does not apply to me. He was in the doorway, imminently inciting a crowd to attack a specific police officer in the threshold of the building. I was 500 feet away saying in very vague terms, we're taking the Capitol back. If a lawyer looked at it, they would say that does not meet the definition of incitement or whatever they charged him with. I was not on the restricted grounds in the building. I was not a member of militia. I was not involved in a scuffle with a law enforcement or his riot shield or anything like that. I'll do you one better if you don't find this convincing. Let's say Straka is like me. He got charged and he made a deal. This is a story about his plea deal with the government. In spite of his big charge, he never got jail time. He got probation because he informed on his people. It says, quote, a pro-Trump organizer and social media influencer who spoke at a D.C. rally the day before the Capitol attack was sentenced to 3 years of probation on Monday. Brandon Straka admitted to recording himself telling the mob to go, go, go as they reached the Capitol and telling rioters who were wrestling a shield away from a Capitol officer to take it. He pleaded guilty to disorderly conduct in October. In court filings last week, Straka's attorneys said he spoke to government investigators 3 times voluntarily and claimed the officials seemed to be trying to establish that there was an organized conspiracy involving the president to overturn the results of the election. The DOJ acknowledged in court filings he was cooperative in these interviews. So, first of all, they say, well, Straka got charged with the same thing you should have been. Well, that's not true at all. Because he was in the doorway, I was 500 feet away. He was involved in a scuffle with law enforcement, I was not. They say this is evidence you're an informant. But he got charged, unlike me, and he got a sweetheart plea deal because he informed, because he cooperated. So which is it? I'll do you one better. There's a story of Ray Epps. Tucker Carlson says that Ray Epps was a federal informant. He incited the riot, and he's protected as a confidential, what did they say? An unindicted co-conspirator, an unnamed, unidentified co-conspirator. Just one problem. Ray Epps was also charged. This is from the New York Times. It says, quote, Ray Epps, the former Trump supporter who became a target of a conspiracy theory that he was an undercover government agent who helped to instigate the J6 Capitol, or the Capitol on J6th, was sentenced on Tuesday to a year of probation for his own role in the riot instead of the 6 months that prosecutors had requested he serve in prison. The probation sentence imposed after Mr. Epps had pleaded guilty last year to a single count of disorderly conduct stemming from his presence in the pro-Trump mob brought his prosecution to a close. Now, in spite of this, people still insist he's an informant. So let's just rewind here. As I said from the beginning, if nothing at all happened to me, they would say, that's suspicious, you're a Fed. But something did happen to me. I got put on the federal no-fly list. My money got frozen. I got banned from Facebook and Instagram. I got debanked. I got banned from DLive. I was banned from all of streaming for years. I'm still banned from credit card processing to this day, still banned from Facebook and Instagram to this day. And they say, oh, well, even though stuff happened to you, that stuff was done to you and that's why you made a deal. Okay. So if nothing happens to you, you're a Fed. If something happens to you, you're still a Fed. Then enter charges. They say, well, you did not get charged, so you're a Fed. But people that got charged demonstrably were informants. That's how they get you to inform. They charge you with something, and then they say, we will lighten the sentence if you inform. That's what Straka did. Maybe that's what Epps did. Either way, both of them are informants, and one of them is still accused of being an informant even though he was charged. So if you don't get charged, like me, you're a Fed. If you do, like Ray Epps, well, you're still a Fed. What does Tucker say? Tucker says the Feds charged Ray Epps to make it look like he wasn't a Fed. Okay? So whether nothing happens or something happens, you're damned. If you don't get charged or you do get charged, you're damned. If you don't get charged, well, that's because you're law enforcement. But if you do, that's law enforcement making it look like you're not law enforcement. So there's no scenario where you can't be caught. Even if you testify under oath, even if you didn't commit a crime, you didn't do anything wrong, no matter what, they will always insinuate that you're a federal agent. But this is not new. Like every other stratagem, like every other tactic, this isn't new. I'll show you this article. This is on Wikipedia. Okay? This is called badjacketing. There's a word for it. Badjacketing is a term for planting doubt on the authenticity of an individual's bona fides or identity. An example would be creating suspicion through spreading false rumors. Creating suspicion. Manufacturing evidence that falsely portrays someone in a community organization as an informant, member of law enforcement, or guilty of malfeasance, such as skimming organization funds.